Hello. I had a question more about the research ethics involved in, well, I guess qualitative and quantitative, but just keeping in mind kind of qualitative, interviews, stuff like that can take a lot of time and sometimes involves location. I guess I was wondering kind of how you approach the ethics of, I always think of like shared value. And there has been more increase of kind of having multiple researchers, like maybe from the local cultural context to try to help rectify some of like the authenticity issues. But I noticed there is kind of a lack of shared benefits to the participants. Like, for example, like at McMaster, I could do a psych study and get like $25 from that. But then when kind of working with what's kind of deemed as like vulnerable populations, there's a lot of ethics concerns about like monetary value and different like almost like payment options for someone's time and someone's like travel to get to maybe some of these qualitative methods. I don't know if you guys have any insights to kind of how to approach it more ethically.
Karen, if you want to go first.
And you look like you're going to talk.
I think this is an ongoing issue, and I think it's something that I think about a lot. In my instance, the populations to this point that I have interviewed, when I did my hospital study, it was trainees and doctors, and it was just in their workplace. But then now with the maternal health study I've been doing, it was cold emails to birth workers, OBs, midwives via their professional websites and their emails. And so everyone was equipped with the resources needed to do a Zoom interview. And so I did Zoom interviews for everyone and then sent folks gift cards afterwards. And so the transportation and some of those very real issues were not as much an issue in this case. But I think the downside to that, right, is that there is a population that's not being sampled, right? It's only folks who have these professional websites and have these emails and who are able to, do a Zoom call with me. So I think that's one part from your question that I think is absolutely an ethical issue. And I know with IRB, it's very complicated when working with populations where the monetary compensation even is put into question, where if it's too much money, they're saying, there can be coercion. But on the flip side, I also think people are giving your time and we should give them, you know, financial compensation for it. And I don't have an answer to that, honestly. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, though. But then I think on the flip side, there's another part to your question around who actually benefits from the research being done. And I think that is a sort of ongoing ethical dilemma as well. My hope with at least the birth workers that I've interviewed, I've majority interviewed birth workers who identify as individuals of color. My hope is that there's increase that this research can translate to really thinking about the pressure and lack of compensation that we are placing on these birth workers in the United States, especially as there's a rollout of Medicaid trials around coverage for doulas and really emphasizing in a lot of ways the need for doulas to improve maternal health disparities in the US. And so I guess my hope is that to shed light on that and to make some impact, but I think this is the ongoing dilemma that sometimes who we're studying, how that positively impacts them in the long run remains uncertain.
Mhm. And just, I guess what I would add on to that is, like, in some ways, I think some of the reasons it remains uncertain has to do with these very issues about how research is racialized and gendered and reinforces a lot of these like default perspectives about where the value is. And I mean, in my end of life research, I spent a lot of time going to people. Like I would show up in their living rooms and interview them, and that was amazing and really productive. But then there were different times in my like career time that I just couldn't do that. And so there was a time where I had to, I took on administrative roles in my department or whatever. And then like I could not be gone driving all over creation, going to people's houses. And it was really bad for my research. So I think those are tricky things to get out of. And then also kind of having sat on a lot of like for NIH in the US review panels for grants, I think it should not be assumed that large quantitative studies don't have their own ethical problems. I think sometimes we treat that as like those are fine, and if you give someone a gift card, that's totally, you've covered your ethics, and those ethics just remain kind of in a black box of their own. And then it's easy to say like, well, did you cover someone's like time and bus fare to come participate in your study? So I think there's ways to kind of flip that conversation around and be asking where ethics resides and where these reinforcement structures come into play.
Thank you.